I'd like to say, good evening to everyone. We're the Safety Committee. I'm here with President Smith Foles and myself, Othari Christian. I'm the chair of the Safety Committee, and we want to welcome everyone who is participating in this meeting for this evening. And so we are going to get started, and with the agenda, I'm going to start off with the land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgement, we recognize that we are presently on the land of the Chakina, oh Lord. Chakino, Milwaukee, Karkin, Ohlone people, and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land, and currently we occupy. Labor and body recognition, knowledge that the burden of the environment and exploitation and systemic injustice falls upon this labor of Black and brown bodies and the building of the country, and this
I acknowledge that the burden of environmental exploitation and systemic injustice falls upon the labor of Black and brown bodies in the building of the country and its institutions. I remember that Black and brown people were born and died working this land against their will for generations. I also acknowledge the continued contribution of labor of survivors over the centuries to today, of all immigrant labor, including voluntary and involuntary traffic, forced, and undocumented peoples in the building of what we refer to as the United States. All right, we got that one. You want me to start the next one?
Yeah. Okay.
The West Contra Costa, this is the anti-racist statement. The West Contra Costa School District Board of Education is committed to the work of anti-racism, the conscious and active effort to identify, challenge, and correct racial inequalities in the systems and institutions within our schools and communities. Racism, implicit or explicit, stands in direct conflict to the fundamental principles of WCC USD education. To carry WCC USD education into the future, we recognize that we must continually renew and reflect on the roots of racism and develop new ideas to meet the times. Unjust ideas and policies and racial inequality they produce have shaped us in our schools and our society. We strive to uncover unconscious biases and practice anti-racism as individuals and board members. We challenge ourselves to persist through the discomfort necessary for growth and learning, to deepen our listening and our examination of racism and oppression, and to develop strong understanding of how our personal experiences and feelings fit into the larger picture of continual oppression. Each member of our school board, individually and collectively, is responsible for creating and nurturing an anti-racist learning environment where each student, staff member, and community partner is a respected and valued member of the WCC USD community. We are uniquely positioned, and it is our responsibility to identify and dismantle racist ideas and inequitable policies in ourselves and across the district. Therefore, we commit to supporting anti-racist policies, programs, and practices for our children's education and well-being, while building strong and inclusive school communities. We commit to holding each board member accountable towards these goals and moving the work of anti-racism forward. We also commit to holding West Contra Costa Unified School District staff, students, and communities to live in these standards of anti-racism in our schools.
All right, appreciate that, President Smith Foles. Thank you. I'm glad to get some more glasses. Because it's I gotta get some more glasses. Sorry about that. All right, and now we'll go with the further of the agenda, and we're going to the minutes from the last meeting. We have a correction from the last, agenda meeting, to make a correction in the spelling. And that's the only correction we need to make. So do we approve the agenda from the last meeting,
Mhm.
the minutes? Okay. And now we're going to this agenda, for today. Do we approve this agenda, for this meeting here?
Mhm.
Okay. And now we're gonna go to, are there any, public comments, concerning safety?
We have no public comment.
All right. And now we're going to C1. We're going to Officer of Neighborhood Safety to give us a temperature engagement of the community, that our students attending. Oh, the person that will be, giving the presentation will be, Joe McCoy, from the Office of Neighborhood Safety.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, council, and thank you for having me here. I got thrown in at the last minute by my director, Sam Bond, and, I'm more than capable of making a presentation and any questions you may have. I have no problem answering. So the temperatures we see it right now, we're coming off of a record year. We only had 8 homicides. This year, we're having a little bit of turbulence due to some folks that just can't get along, it seems like. We had a couple of different isolated incidents that may have, isolated shootings that are not connected. That may seem like the community is going back wild, but one of the incidents honestly was a family incident. It's been solved. Law enforcement has a suspect. I think they arrested the suspect. The other incident is between 2 rivaling neighborhoods, and we're working diligently, as I know most likely RPD is also working to try to combat the violence. We're working diligent just to make sure that, we're in the streets and making sure that we also help curb the violence. The school district has been more than helpful, allowing us, towards the end of the school year. I know we have classes at El Cerrito High, Lavanya Day, John, and also at Richmond High. We're also doing work at, helping with Richmond High Summer School, where we're holding a life skills class with, I think 10 to 12 individuals. Ability temperature a little rise compared to this time last year. And I will take any questions that you need to ask.
Do you have any questions? Are any of these like incidents, like with our students, does this affect any of our schools in our area?
I think any violence in our community affects the schools because the young people, our city has a culture of, if you hanging, you banging. So they could see someone on a video or a picture of someone, just assume that they're in the midst of the feud. So I think at this point that a lot of our young people are in danger. And one good thing is we don't have a lot of people that hang outside. More people now stay in, play the Xbox, do what they need to do in those type of areas, which is good. But definitely the students are at risk depending on what's going on.
Right. Okay. And what some of the ways, as, well, you already mentioned some of the things that you already, the Office of Neighborhood Safety is participating at some of the school sites. What else, anything that you see that, as, working together, from our district and, Office of Neighborhood Safety?
Right now, I think the relationship with the schools that we've been at have been great. Staff has really been, receptive. They give us calls, we call them, even it was an incident with some of the students from one of the schools that happened in San Francisco. The staff had got a hold of and they gave us a call about it. And, we tried to go to court and advocate for the youngsters from San Francisco. That got in trouble in San Francisco. So we have an awesome relationship. I don't really know what else we can do to strengthen our relationship right now because, it's new.
Mhm.
and we're learning each other, because even though we've been around a while, you know, we weren't always allowed in the school district, but
Right,
everything is getting better.
okay. Um. No, this just came to my mind. Um. Is there any way like, if ONS, like when we start back school, like in the fall, that they can kind of, talk to the safety staff
Yeah.
and give the safety staff kind of, how to, recognize certain things or, keep their ears to the ground, always listening, for certain things, if you guys can, you know,
We don't have any problem with anybody having a conversation, with anybody to make our young, safer,
yeah,
we have not a problem with that.
because our safety staff, they engage a lot of our young people every single day and day in and day out. And I think that'd be helpful, as a, working together.
Not a problem. We're more than happy to meet, talk, help any way that we can. We are a part of the community and the school district is a part of the community, so we're one.
All right. You have anything? You good? All right. Well, that's it, man. Hey, appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you for allowing me to come in and speak in your face.
Yes, thank you. All right, man. Thank you.
Anytime.
Now,
Let's be.
we're gonna go to C2, safety and emergency, engage, safety and emergency operation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here today to talk about safety and emergency operations. If you remember, on the meeting on May 23rd, LaShante Smith gave an overview of how we deal with our students on a social emotional level. So that was part of our prevention strategy. Today, I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm also going to talk about the strategy that we use for social emotional as well as physical safety. So, the first thing that we look at is our phases of emergency management. And like I talked about with regard to prevention, LaShante Smith gave a lot of information about that, a lot of informative information. And there's things that we do to try to prevent or mitigate some of the incidents that could occur or may occur in our schools. And then we look at how do we prepare? How do we prepare as a district? How do we prepare our sites? How do we prepare our students and staff? And then our response. So if there is a critical incident or emergency, how do we respond to that emergency? And then finally, how do we recover from that emergency once it has occurred at a district level, at a site level, and at a community level? So there are human factors for safety, and they're the 5 Ps. The first one is planning, is how do we effectively plan for emergencies across our district and at our school sites? And then we look at the process by which we use to make people informed and to give them the information and to educate them to the processes that we currently have. And then we develop policies, whether they're administrative regulations or board policies that we use for safety. And then what do we do in terms of practice? How do we push out drills? How do we get the staff and student body to actively engage in emergency preparedness and planning? And then finally, the people. How do we get our staff better trained to deal with critical incidents or emergency situations? And then more important, putting the right people in certain areas or schools where they're needed. So first, I'm going to talk about the prevention phase. And like I said, LaShante Smith talked about this, so I won't go into great detail. But the first thing that she talked about was the climate and safety at our schools. So each school has a climate and safety team. Those teams are active on our sites. and they talk about everything from culture and climate to safety. And they report out at the district level to make sure that, we have the information and we can support them in, any climate and safety issues that they may have. And then she talked about the tiers, the tier level 1, 2, and 3, that we use to, as an intervention strategy, for our students. Tier 1 would be the social emotional behavior, and that's for all students. Tier 2 is a targeted support, and that's for some students. And then tier 3 is the intensive supports, which are for fewer students. But we have a system where we can engage all students, with any kind of, whether it's social, emotional, or physical safety. And then central interventions, how do we, as a central office, assist these sites with social emotional safety? And then looking at our long-term strategies, how do we engage our students and our staff with regard to not only social emotional safety, but physical safety as well? And then looking at the data for social emotional as well as physical safety, and using that data to better enhance our current measures. Now I want to talk about the preparedness phase. How we prepare staff. One of the ways that we prepare our staff is that we use Keenan Safe Schools, and that's training for all employees. And that training is on a yearly basis, and it is done on a cadence. So they are trained throughout the year. And so when you look at the ongoing review of the drills and training protocols, we actually look at not only our drills that we are doing at every school site, but we also look at the training protocols that we are offering and seeing if they're working. Do we need to adjust them? Is there something that we can add? Are we conforming to what the county and state is doing, as well as best practice? And then when you look at our school and auxiliary site drill calendar, so we do have a calendar that is automated. So this is given to all the principals at the beginning of the year. This is an automated system for reporting drill completion. So it's a Google form, and this Google form allows them, once they complete a drill, to fill it out, and then it's submitted. Once it's submitted, it goes into a spreadsheet that we keep central. And so we know what drills are being done, how often they're being done, and if a school site is not doing it. If they are not completing these drills that are mandated by the California Department of Education, we then send them a friendly reminder to make sure they complete those drills. And we also send the schools a drill calendar, which they could go by to complete these drills on a monthly basis. So when you look at layered physical security, so we take a layered approach to physical safety so that it ensures that the system works in an integrated way to detect, delay, and respond to threats. And it helps to prevent single points of failure. So when I talk about single points of failure, if all I have is keep doors closed and that's breached, that's a single point of failure.
Right.
And so if you look at the slide, it has Swiss cheese. So this is a Swiss cheese approach. So if I just have one piece of cheese, there's many holes in that cheese. And so if I put another piece of cheese on there, it covers up some of those holes.
Right.
So the more layers that I have, the less likely that we will have a breach or we will have some type of loss. And so it's important for us to look at this layer strategy every time we deal with one of our school sites. So where we start is from the perimeter control. So what we do is we look from outside going in. So we look at our fencing and gates, making sure that if schools have fencing and gates, that they are properly maintained and that they are closed when they're supposed to be closed, and making sure that they have a strategy for keeping those gates closed. If the fences have holes in them, making sure that we get those work orders in so that is rectified. But more important, if a school lacks that measure, we make sure that we take a good look at it to see how fencing and gates can help their perimeter control. And then we look at our outdoor protective measures. So that would be lights, surveillance systems, and interior gates. And so making sure that we have the proper lighting, making sure that our surveillance system, meaning our camera systems, are working appropriately. And then making sure that our internal gates are working as well. And then we look at our access control, looking at our key systems, our locking mechanisms, and our alarm systems. Making sure that if we are using keys, that the appropriate people have those keys, but they are the keys that they're supposed to have for their site. And then looking at our locking mechanisms, if something doesn't work, we need to get it fixed.
Right.
And then looking at our alarm system, making sure that every school has an alarm system, making sure that they work when they're supposed to work. And making sure that if the alarm does go off, we get the appropriate response from public safety. And then looking at our indoor protective measures, looking at our communications, how do we communicate? Are our phone systems working?
Right.
Are our PA systems working? Are our radios that we use for each site, are they working properly? And then looking at our door locks, and that includes classroom doors, making sure that in the event that there is a critical incident, that they have the ability to lock those doors quickly. And then looking at our surveillance systems, making sure that our interior surveillance systems work as well as our exterior surveillance systems. So when we look at access control in our visitors policies, we look at controlling points of access onto a campus. So when we talk about a single point of access, we're not talking about one door or one gate. We're talking about access points that can be physically managed by people, that they can see who's coming in and out of a campus. And so that's reducing the number of doors and gates that may be open from the outside during school hours. And then enforcing our closed campus policy, looking at our closed campus policy, which this district has had for some time.
Right.
But we have to make sure that we are diligent in terms of people understanding why we have a closed campus policy and the importance of the closed campus policy.
Right.
And then looking at our visitor sign-in procedure. So every school has a visitor sign-in procedure. There are some systems that we are looking at that we may present at a later date in terms of automating that system. But right now, everybody that is a visitor on the campus should be signing in, and they should have a temporary ID when they're on the campus. And then our identification badge policy. At our secondary schools, our high school and middle schools, everybody, staff and students, are required to wear IDs. And if they don't, there should be a remedy for that at the site level. If there is an issue with a machine or something like that, or they don't know how to implement that policy or strategy, we can support them with that. At the elementary level, we require that all adults or staff wear identification badges. And then training staff, including support personnel, to greet and challenge strangers. So it's one thing to say something to somebody coming on campus, but to challenge them in a way that's not confrontational.
Right.
To greet them, there's a thing that they use across the county, just say hello. And so a lot of times that can diffuse a situation, and you get them to the point where you can direct them to the office. And then educate our general public about access control strategy and compliance standards. And so if you look at 626.7 of the penal code, it talks about those strategies, and if they're violated, what the consequence could be for that. And so understanding that we do have a access control at every site, but we need to make sure that they understand what the compliance standard is.
Right.
And then our facility assessment. So we do this at the district and site level. So facility assessment is done by the safety department at the district level. And then at the high school or the secondary, middle and high school, we have our campus safety supervisors participating in this assessment. So what we do is we look at the outside in. So we do a CPTED analysis, which is a crime prevention through environmental design. And we look at the outside and work our way in to see what the vulnerabilities of that site is. And then if there's a vulnerability, how can we support that site in rectifying that? If it requires some district level support, then we make sure we get that support, whether it's from the safety department, whether it's from M&O or any other department that we have at the district level. And then for our staff, we have a school safety procedures quick guide. So this school safety, procedures quick guide actually helps the administrators with anything related to safety. So it's a guide that has links to greater detailed, documents for, so they can look at it. And so if you had a question, they can just look at this document.
Mhm.
Like, for example, you have, in box number 1, you have K-12 emergency preparedness drill procedures. If you click on that, it gives you detailed information on not only how to do the drills, when to do them, and then it has the document that you would fill out, that, they have to submit for those. And if you look at safety and access control, we have the visitors policy. We have the access control for sites, how you actually implement that.
Mhm.
And then the emergency responses, what are our responses, which I'll talk about in a little bit. What are our responses in case there is an emergency? So this is given to all our administrators, all our office managers, and so they have the ability to use this anytime they have an emergency situation. But it doesn't prohibit them from calling us
Right.
if they don't get an answer through the quick guide. So everybody knows that, the California Department of Education requires that every school site complete a comprehensive site safety plan each and every year. And those comprehensive site safety plans have to be approved by the safety department and then adopted, by either the safety committee or the board. So those are done every single year. And we make sure at the district level that they are in compliance, giving them a due date, making sure that they complete the areas that they need to complete. And then if they have any questions, we can support them with that as well. But if you look at this comprehensive site safety plan, what it covers is basically 10 areas, 10 sections. And it has an introduction, a concepts of operation, a preparedness effort, emergency response roles, emergency response actions, emergency evacuation procedures, school climate index, our bullying, attendance, and finally, our school climate report. And that is all a requirement by the CDE. So we're gonna talk about the response phase. And like I talked about earlier, so there's a detection, delay, and the response. And so when we look at our physical security strategy, we look from this lens, the detection, delay, and response. And so when we're detecting, we're looking at things like monitoring our cameras, making sure that we have line of sight views, making sure that we have natural surveillance. So, clean windows, unblocked, stuff like that. So that's the detection. And then the delay, like I talked about earlier, was that how do we delay somebody from getting past just a single point of failure? So the delays is making sure that our fences are fortified, making sure that our windows and doors are closed when they're supposed to be, making sure that if we do have an automatic locking system, that it works properly.
Right.
And then making sure that we have personnel in place that can see something and then say something.
Mhm.
And then the response is how do we communicate and when there is an emergency? How do we communicate to the district? How do we communicate to the community? How do we communicate to the staff and students on site? How do we do that effectively? And then looking at, in case of an emergency and the worst case scenario, an active shooter, is do we have the first aid kits and the things that they need in the classrooms?
Mhm.
And so we do all of this to make sure that we have a formidable strategy dealing with, the physical safeties of these schools. And then we look at, just like we look at social emotional and we look at the 3 tiers, we look at the levels of emergency. So when you look at the levels of emergency, level 1 is a school emergency. So that doesn't require any district personnel or anybody outside of the district, so public safety. So that is strictly a site-based incident and the site is dealing with that incident. Level 2 is when the district does get involved, and usually it's the safety team or the emergency response team. And so there would be a response from the district, and it may be a response from a community organization like we just had on as or barrier peacekeepers or some organization like that. Level 3 is a response that requires that public safety gets involved. As well as, an agency like, the Red Cross or something like that.
Mhm.
And so making sure that we understand the levels and how we respond to those levels.
Right.
And then our response action, looking at during an emergency, there are 4 primary responses. And the first one is secure. The second one is lockdown. The next one is evacuation. And the final one is shelter in place.
Okay.
Each of the response types must be used when addressing emergency situations.
Mhm.
District personnel respond based on the type of event. And so there may be some times where they're in secure mode that you won't get a district response, but I'm gonna talk about these in more detail.
Okay.
So secure is the protocol for securing a perimeter of the school, but classroom and normal activities continue uninterrupted. And usually they're in secure mode when there is a threat outside of the campus. So it's in the community, but it doesn't affect the campus. So they would be in secure mode. And the site has the ability to lift the secure mode. If you look at lockdown, this is the protocol to secure individual rooms and keep students quiet and in place. All activities cease operations. So this is when the threat is on the campus. There's an intruder or there's a weapon on campus.
Mhm.
And in some cases, it would be an active armed assailant. And so this is different from secure because you're not doing anything. You're making sure that everybody that is in a classroom, they are secure and they are making sure that it is completely locked down. And the only person or agency that can lift a lockdown is a police agency.
Right.
And so making sure that our sites understand that. And then evacuation is the protocol for removing staff and students from classrooms and buildings. And usually this is initiated when there's a fire or bomb threat or something of that nature, or, a power outage that has extended time. And so in the event of the evacuation, folks would go to a designated location, whether it's on campus or off campus, until the threat is been taken care of. And then shelter in place is the protocol for group and self-protection. Doors and windows must remain closed during the incident. Classroom activity can continue as normal. So what is different from shelter in place, lockdown, and secure? Well, shelter in place is for a hazmat situation. So there is a situation where a hazmat, usually like a Chevron spill or something like that occurred. We're asking people to stay inside. We're asking people to, close the windows, cover the bottom of the doors, and make sure that those students and staff are inside secure. So now we're gonna look at the recovery phase. So we responded, now we get to the point where we're trying to recover from a critical incident. Okay. And so when we look at after a recovery stage, we look at our after action briefing and reports. These are critical for capturing key lessons learned and recommendations for improvement. So if you notice, not only do we have after action briefings for critical incidents, but we also have them for like our graduations and any incident, any situation where it requires a number of personnel. And we have to do our operations plan. And so it helps us identify what worked and the gaps and weaknesses in emergency management plans and responses. And so these are conducted at 2 levels. So it's an internal and district level, and then there's an external community level. So once we brief at the internal level, then we meet with the community. And usually that's done through the communications department, but sometimes we may actually have a in-person meeting or a Zoom meeting where we can explain what happened at any critical incident. These briefings normally take place within a 72-hour period.
Right.
All site leaders are aware of this, and the participants should include school staff, first responders, and other key stakeholders. And so in summary, effective response involves pre-planning with all staff, not just the staff that's at the school, because we have itinerant staff, we have folks that come from M&O. They don't necessarily know if something is going on a campus, so it's important for people to check in.
Right.
And then for them to give them the quick to-dos on if there is a response, what they should be doing. And then, responses to emergency will vary depending on the severity and intensity of the event. Responses to emergency involve informed decision-making and clear identification of lines of decision-making authority. So knowing what your incident command structure is, so knowing who becomes the incident commander, who's responsible for safety, who's responsible for the operations. So you have that at two levels. You have it at the district level, and then you have it at the site level, and it's also incorporated in the site plans. And then looking at during a response, there are the 4 key response actions. Like I mentioned, secure, evacuation, lockdown, and shelter in place. And then after action briefings and reports are an integral part of the emergency management continuum. So in short, this is how we prepare this district for an emergency response. So with that, I open it up to any questions that you guys may have.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the presentation, and it was very enlightening. And so, I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to the, what you just mentioned, where the staff, where safety staff and the principals, and, you know, all the different key entities on that school site. Is it any way, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, for me, just looking at, like that they, you know, like practice together once a month on certain things, you know, that way they can be in, on the same page.
So that is a requirement. So drills is what's considered practice. So when they're doing their drills, if it's at a secondary level, a high school or a middle school, they should be working hand in hand with the CSs and the CS supervisor. So if that becomes an issue, then the district safety department gets involved and tries to help them work together. And so that is a requirement. You're supposed to do a drill every month. What that drill is, it depends on the school, but they should be doing a drill a month.
Okay. Yeah. You have any questions? You covered a lot of information. There's a lot of information that was covered, you know, especially, lockdowns and, shelter in place, you know, even, bomb threats.
Well, I will say this is that, you know, it's about the information and education, right? So, you know, we have a lot of information, but the key to making our strategy effective is educating folks, whether it's the community, the staff, and the students. And so we did a better job than we did the year before. Our rollout this year is going to be intense, because there are going to be some things that we actually look at. And with us having this safety committee, there will be some ARs that we presented to the safety committee that will eventually be a board policy. And so we want to make sure that we don't have administrators that are not informed on a safety response, because you're dealing with people's lives, literally.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're getting this information out, and there's some redundancy in it. So we're giving them information, repeating the information, and constantly reinforcing this so they do understand that it is important.
Yes. Okay. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh. First aid. CPR. So everybody should be, you know, if they ever have to use the CPR and first aid.
So, and you know, from when you were a CSO, is that every year, we do a refresher for the CSs. And so every year before school starts, they go through a refresher, on first aid and CPR, because it is a requirement for them to have it. As far as teachers are concerned, there is, or when they first get the job, they should have first aid CPR. Now, in terms of their training, it's not continuous because that has to do with unions and stuff like that. So,
Right.
but I do make a recommendation all the time when I do their training, is that everybody that is dealing with a young person should be first aid, CPR certified.
All right. I say, great job on the presentation. Well, that's it. That's all I have. And we're looking at the future meeting. So I would say, August.
Yeah, so
August.
the third Thursday in August would be.
Yeah.
8/22.
And we'll pick back up in August.
Okay.
The only thing I would say is that is the first couple of weeks of school. And so not only are we pushing out a lot of information to the sites, but they're trying to get their sites together. So August for a meeting, although I obviously we need these meetings, but it could be problematic.
Okay.
And especially if we're trying to get more people involved in the safety committee.
Okay.
That first month is really difficult.
So you wanna wait till September?
It'll be September 26th.
Okay.
If you could get us the agenda topics, that you'd like to have, we'll get it on the agenda, get the presentations prepared, so, as you think about that, if you get us by the 1st of September, that would be great.
Right. That's great. So, so the next meeting will be September the 26th.
That's right.
And we will see everybody in September the 26th for the safety, committee meeting. And we are signing out.